Hello everyone, it's Adam Westbrook here with another behind-the-scenes production commentary exclusively for you guys supporting me on Patreon. Once again, thank you so much for your support, it really does make a difference. And I hope that you're finding these production commentaries useful. So today we're going to take a look at my video essay about the Peter Principle. This was actually an idea that I first stumbled upon about 9 months before I was able to start work on it. I think at the time I was still making videos with Fusion, and I remember pitching it to them, but they weren't interested in the story, so I had to kind of sit on it for quite a while. But I knew straight away once I stumbled on the book in the library that I really wanted to turn it into a video essay because it had a lot of elements to it that I found have great potential in the kind of video essay format. So, you know, at the heart of it was this very provocative but also quite counterintuitive idea. It had great visual potential. It involved going back in the past and also taking a look at our future. And it was also just seemed extremely kind of relevant to our lives as well. So as soon as I got the chance, I got to work on it. And now we'll go through and I'll talk through some of the narrative and visual challenges and problems I came across and how I tried to solve them.
And we're getting a picture on the TV.
So this first scene actually ended up being one of the biggest learning points for me in this essay. I really like the idea of the scene. I think it's a really kind of strong anecdotal story, a surprising little story that works really well to kind of hook us in to the issue. But I got some really interesting feedback from a couple of my beta testers. A couple of people said that they found this scene a bit confusing, and that surprised me. I thought this scene was nice and kind of simple and straightforward. And so I asked them to kind of clarify, and a couple of them made this really interesting point, which was that the scene starts, when it starts, it's about, or appears to be about the moon landing, but then becomes about the moon landing tapes and what happened to them. And although that seems like a very subtle distinction, they are actually two separate things. There's the moon landing and the moon landing tapes. And it was a lesson for me in the importance of clarity in doing this kind of storytelling. You've got to tell your story one idea at a time. It has to be just one, and the idea has to be really singular and not include any information that's not part of it. So I had to kind of rewrite the scene a little bit, just to change a couple of lines of the script early on in the scene to make it about the tapes earlier than I intended it to be, so that it was kind of singular all the way through. And I found that kind of idea of clarity is a lot of hard work, but kind of really pays off in the end. A victim of incompetence. This second scene also ended up being a real challenge as well, mostly because of this montage and this kind of microfiche effect. The animation itself, creating the microfiche, was quite easy, but cutting it ended up being really difficult because I wanted to kind of have a rhythm and a tempo to go with the music, but at the same time we had to be able to have the text on screen long enough and the headlines had to be simple enough that you guys would be able to understand them very quickly and not be confused, and that turned out to be a real challenge. But it does end really well. I love this. I just got very lucky and found this clip on a Creative Commons part of Vimeo, and then with this kind of little punchline, it works really well. And I kind of think by this point, hopefully, that's the bit where I've kind of sold the story on the audience, and they're going to kind of join me for the rest of the story. Was taking place down on Earth. An unknown teacher. Coming up to the end of the first act, all that's left to do is basically the kind of promise of a solution. So here we introduce the book, and I use these extreme close-ups to kind of whet your appetite about what the book might be about, but without kind of giving too much information away.
You are about to witness history in the making.
Something I knew really early on when I was making this was that it was really important to take a tongue-in-cheek approach to this story and not take it too seriously. Mainly because Lawrence J. Peter didn't take himself too seriously either. If you get a chance to read The Peter Principle, which I recommend doing, it's not a serious book. It's very light-hearted. And so I think it was important to kind of reflect that in the making of this film. Also, if you don't make it funny, the idea itself is also quite depressing. So it was quite important, I think, to kind of have that kind of light-hearted approach. As we're coming now into the second act, this is all about the idea of ambition. First of all, sort of setting up as we understand it, which is as a positive thing, and then having this reverse and revealing that that kind of wasn't always the case. A lot of the material for these couple of scenes came from a book called Ambition from Vice to Virtue by William Casey King, which basically kind of made the argument that I'm making here. And then towards the end of this scene, it's important to then move us to the idea of promotion as kind of the modern expression of ambition, which is really important for then introducing us to the book. I often talk about the difficulty of introducing photographs or paintings of people into a story because of their shape and stuff. This one was difficult because there is a photograph of Lawrence J. Peter on the internet, but it's so small, it's like 200 pixels across, that I couldn't find a high-res version. So I had to get really creative there in finding a way to kind of put his picture on the screen. I found it actually kind of worked quite well with the kind of ironic and tongue-in-cheek nature that I was trying to take with the video. I got really lucky with Archive as well. There were some great kind of industrial films that I could use to kind of express the point. I actually used 3 mostly. There was one called Your Name Here, which is also a kind of tongue-in-cheek and ironic look at the industrial film. There was another video, strangely called The Dingback Story, and then another film as well called How to Keep a Job appears once or twice. But the footage works really well. It's kind of the same period as the book, so it kind of has this kind of nice kind of 60s aesthetic to it all the way through. And it's really nice as well just to break up solid narration with some other sounds and kind of actuality. I've always found that's a good way to kind of vary the story.
Now, this is twice in a row.
And here's the thing, once you're here, you can't get promoted out of it. You're not competent enough. Really wish I could have made more of this guy, though. He has such a brilliant face. And so you're stuck, doing a job badly.
Oh, boy.
And anyway, then finally we introduce the book. And notice how I do that at the end of the point rather than early on. That's quite an important way I find of kind of delivering information in these kind of stories. But it goes even deeper. The Peter Principle. And then these animations were hard, actually, because, again, to try and fit this 60s aesthetic, although I made them in After Effects, I kind of had to cut them to look like, or edit them to make them look like they were kind of done by hand in the 1960s, which this doesn't work very well there. But anyway, then we have the second montage here, equally difficult, because we're bringing in stock footage, and again you have these microfiche headlines which have got to be quick to read. I just did so many variations on these montages. The only thing I didn't change was the music, which on reflection maybe I should have done. It might have been that music was the difficult bit because it hasn't got a kind of 3/4 rhythm to it. And the stock footage was hard as well, just because I kind of broke a cardinal rule of using stock footage with people in it, because it's normally really crap. But because of the tongue-in-cheek nature of the video, I think I was able to kind of do it in an ironic way. This scene here was added in at the very end. Those of you who saw the rough cut of this will know that this scene actually, I used some other archive footage of a couple in bed arguing, but a few of you said it was too complicated to understand my voice and their voice, and it was cut too quickly, so I took your feedback and changed it. And then here we go, when I introduced this idea of creative incompetence, I had to change this as well. I initially kind of set it up as a solution, albeit ironically, but people felt that I set it up too much and it was disappointing. So I made this change here where I act equally as shocked and disappointed in the idea, in the solution, as the audience are, to be on your side, and also to kind of hammer home the kind of futility of avoiding the Peter Principle. And then we have this final montage. Initially, in the first cut, I didn't have any dialogue here. I just let the music play and the pictures, and then just let the planet explode. But strangely, that again left people quite confused. This is one of the things where I always kind of find myself bashing up against the ceiling of the video essay format. I kind of want to leave it open to interpretation and leave some stuff ambiguous. But I think with this format and the expectations of this genre, people want to have some reflection at the end, some kind of line to tell them what it's about, just for the story to kind of feel rounded and complete. So I reluctantly had to give in there, but also admit that it does work a lot better than what I'd originally planned. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. Again, let me know if there's something you want to me to talk more about or less about in the future. I'm really open to your feedback. And if you've got any questions about this video, then put them in the comments. Thanks for watching.